Welcome to this year's Living the Plan of Nashville annual luncheon. My name is Ryan Doyle, and I am president of the board of the Nashville Civic Design Center. It has been a very exciting year since we last gathered, and I hope you all look forward to hearing about what the center has accomplished, as well as where the center and our region is heading in the future. The center's work, and specifically today's event, would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. First, I would like to thank the University of Tennessee College of Architecture and Design for their ongoing partnership with the center. With us today are Provost Susan Martin and the Dean of the College, Scott Poole. Also with us is the center's past design director, who many of you continue to work with, TK Davis. Thank you, TK, for your ongoing support and innovative Nashville-based studio work. I would also like to welcome Tennessee State University's new president, Dr. Glenda Glover, and thank you to Bob Murphy and Rick Bernhardt for being this year's luncheon co-chairs. Thank you to our keynote sponsors, the Scott C. Chambers Fund, Earl Swenson and Associates, Village Real Estate Services, the Metropolitan Nashville Planning Department, and One City. Thank you to our cornerstone sponsors, RPM Transportation Consultants, the Nashville Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, J.E. Dunn Construction, Gresham Smith and Partners, Hawkins Partners, Waller, Hastings Architects Associates, Stites and Harbison, Tennessee State University, Southern Land Company, and Vanderbilt University. Thank you also to our voussoir sponsors, whose names you will find in the program. With us today, we have our mayor, the Honorable Carl Dean, as well as a number of council members. Thank you all for joining us today. Several of you in this room have participated in the leadership of the organization since we were founded in 2000. Would all of the past and current board members please stand up? The Nashville Civic Design Center continues to promote the development of our communities through applicable and innovative design and the importance of citizen input in the many projects throughout Middle Tennessee. We continue to be the model for other design centers around the country. We impact the experience of living in, working in, and visiting Nashville. And near to my heart, we have developed into a significant voice for the impact of how the built environment shapes the health of individuals and how they connect with the places they consider creative and inspirational, necessary or supportive, or simply the neighborhoods they call home. The Nashville Civic Design Center is truly a remarkable and important asset to our city's history and future. And now, to hear the exciting highlights of the work we have completed and what lies ahead, it is my pleasure to introduce our design director, Gary Gaston.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you again to all of you for attending today. Each year we gather at this luncheon to acknowledge the spirit that went into creating the Plan of Nashville, a process that unfolded over the course of 2.5 years between 2002 and 2005, and involved more than 800 citizens in a series of 50 public meetings and workshops. The process created a series of guiding principles of how Nashvillians want the city to look and function in the future. This event gives us the opportunity to showcase the work of the Nashville Civic Design Center over the past year that is living the Plan of Nashville. In May, the Design Center released Reclaiming Public Space in Downtown Nashville, a study focused on improving the quality of public space in Nashville's downtown core. With an increase in downtown residents, workers, and visitors, so comes the need for more public space, and more importantly, better functioning public space. Reclaiming Public Space identifies 8 existing and potential new sites for public spaces in downtown. The report also offers a toolbox and checklists that can be used to help guide the design of successful public spaces and evaluate the success of these spaces. This report is a continuation of a chapter in our Moving Tennessee Forward book that focused on the intersection of 21st Avenue South, Broadway, and Division Street. Metro Public Works is currently working to resolve this awkward intersection. This chapter introduced the topic of parklets, which are small public spaces created by transforming unused right-of-way into plazas and parks. The example seen here is the intersection of Market and Castro Streets in San Francisco, a busy intersection that had significant automobile, bus, streetcar, and pedestrian traffic that was transformed into a parklet with huge success. The intersection of 21st Avenue and Broadway has strong potential to serve as Nashville's first pilot project for a parklet, incorporating traffic calming, public transit, a bike station, public art, and outdoor seating to create a vibrant plaza in a location where public space is currently lacking. As a practical way of showcasing the impact that even the tiniest of public spaces can have on creating a vibrant street life, Parking Day cannot be beat. This international event is held in cities around the world to promote public space by transforming metered parking spots into temporary public parks and plazas. This was the second year in a row the Nashville Civic Design Center organized this event, and let me tell you, it was a huge success, growing from 7 spaces last year in downtown to 30 this year. We even spotted a few celebrities during the course of the day. Sorry, Mayor, I couldn't resist throwing that in there, and we wanted to thank you for coming out and seeing the spaces. And of course, and since it is impossible these days for Nashville to not make seemingly any top 10 list, we were thrilled to discover that we ranked number 9 in all the cities around the world that participated in Parking Day. So we think that's very exciting for our second year. Thank you. The Nashville Civic Design Center's partnership with the University of Tennessee College of Architecture and Design continues to provide an incredible catalyst for promoting innovative design ideas for new projects in Nashville. And by the way, I want to point out that the College of Architecture gets the prize today for traveling the farthest to be here with us. And I personally want to acknowledge my mentors, 2 men that I had the pleasure of working with while they were design directors, T.K. Davis and Mark Shimenti. Thank you very much for your dedication. Associate Professor T.K. Davis leads the work of 3 studios a year that are focused exclusively on Nashville and the Middle Tennessee region. This past summer, TK's students took on the topic of micro-unit housing. These are efficiently designed residential units that take up less than 450 square feet of space. Many cities are building these to meet the market demands of the millennial generation, which wants affordable housing in the midst of all the amenities the urban core offers. The study looked at 5 different locations in downtown Nashville, and this beautifully designed report is available for download on our website. This Friday, we will release the 2-volume report, Access and Livability, which features TK's student design work from the fall of 2012 and the spring of 2013 semesters. These reports explore transit-oriented development opportunities along the Ellington Parkway corridor, at the Trinity Lane exit, and at the Parkway's terminus where I-24, Spring Street, and 5th Street intersect. The latter site was identified in the plan of Nashville and has been nicknamed Spaghetti Junction. If you've been there, you understand why. These 2 sites are tremendously compelling. They are huge, they have excellent access to interstate and future rapid transit, and they are largely owned by Metro and state government. TK's current studio project is focusing on 2 transit-oriented development sites on the northwest extension of the Music City Star commuter train, anticipated to connect to Clarksville, Tennessee. These sites are in the North Gulch and one close to Tennessee State University in North Nashville. The bulk of our work at the Civic Design Center over the past year has focused on the Shaping Healthy Communities project, which is supported through a partnership with the Nashville Public Health Department, Vanderbilt University, the Nashville Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the Tennessee Department of Transportation. Shaping Healthy Communities focuses on the interconnected relationship between the built environment and public health. Through our research, we identified 6 built environment factors that impact public health. Cities that are conscious of these factors related to planning and design can have long-term positive public health outcomes. This project will culminate with the release of a book published by Vanderbilt University Press early next spring. Here are several layouts of the first chapter designed by Vanderbilt Creative Services. The beauty of this project is that it presents Nashville as a national case study for cities and towns of all sizes and shapes that are seeking to make their communities healthier. This book will have hundreds of illustrations and strategy recommendations for how to create economically viable, healthy places, from the most rural of areas to the densest. Here's a sneak peek at some of the illustrations featured in the Shaping Healthy Communities book. I'm very pleased that this project has already garnered national recognition in the American Institute of Architects' Healthy Leaders Through Design publication, and I will be presenting the research and work on this topic at the Revolution Conference later this month in Seattle. In conclusion, I encourage you all to visit the Nashville Civic Design Center over the course of the next year to see in person the wonderful work we are doing. Please visit our website where all of the information I've talked about today is available to download and view. And as always, we are thrilled to be doing the work we are doing, and we want you to know that it would not be possible without your support. Thank you again so much for being here today. Now, one of the most exciting things about this job for me is seeing how quickly Nashville is transforming, and knowing that everybody in this room is playing a part in making that happen and guiding Nashville's change. But it takes vision and leadership to make great things happen, and we are lucky to have those qualities in our mayor. Mayor, thank you for being here again this year and for speaking, and what I would like to ask everyone to please help me welcome the Honorable Mayor Caldine.
Well, thank you, Gary, and thank you for inviting me to be with you again this year to celebrate a healthy vision for Nashville. And thank you to the Nashville Civic Design Center and all of its partners for the work you continue to do in creating and living the plan of Nashville, as well as the great work in the Shaping Healthy Communities project in partnership with the Metro Health Department. I want to take a moment to recognize some elected officials who are with us. First, let me recognize my seatmate, Senator Henry. Senator, thank you for being here. Former Mayor Bill Purcell is with us. Bill, if you could. And we have from the Metro Council, Megan Berry, Jerry Maynard, Peter Westerholm, Berkeley Allen, Walter Hunt. Thank them for being here, and thank them for the support for making Nashville a better place to live. The diversity of this room, filled with about 400 people who work in design, development, transportation, social services, universities, government, and the general community, is a testament to Nashville's growth and strength, as well as the broad appeal of the Nashville Civic Design Center and the impact it's having. As a city, we have truly hit our stride, and that is something we should all be proud of. The urbanist and author Richard Florida recently visited Nashville and discussed why Nashville is booming. As both Richard Florida and the Triumph of the City author Edward Glaser will tell you, cities don't rise and fall by chance. There are very clear patterns to what make a city successful. Some matters are beyond our control, like moderate climate and central location. Other parts of the equation we can control. Diversified economy, affordable living, business-friendly practices, high quality of life, and having an educated workforce. But what makes Nashville stand apart from other mid-sized cities that have these same qualities is our ability to attract creative and entrepreneurial people and the energy and innovation that comes from being a center of bright minds and talented individuals. And a big reason why we're attractive to those people is what Florida calls our quality of place, the very topic we are discussing here today. The Civic Design Center focuses on envisioning the future of Nashville, on creating a better built environment for all Nashvillians, both for current residents and for the future. This is exactly what we as a city have to stay focused on if we want to stay on top. And we're doing that by continuing to invest in our downtown and the quality of place in all parts of our city. From riverfront redevelopment, which we announced this summer, we're going to continue on both banks of the river, to the Gulch pedestrian bridge, which will connect the Gulch to Sobro across the CSX railroad tracks, to the baseball stadium that we'd like to bring to North Nashville, to the new library we're about to start building in Bellevue, to the police precinct we're constructing off 12th Avenue, to the park, library, and hockey center complex underway in Antioch, to the thousands of acres of open space and new parkland we've acquired across Davidson County in East Nashville, Hermitage, and other areas. We're investing in these things because that's how you keep a city strong, by constantly improving and constantly thinking about the future. As we think about the future, the biggest investment we need to make going forward is in mass transit. By the year 2035, just a little over 20 years from now, Nashville is expected to be the same size as Denver is today. And can you imagine Denver without mass transit? With the growth that is occurring in Nashville and our region, traffic congestion is going to become increasingly worse. Moving around our city is going to get harder for everyone. But we can make it less hard if we plan for it. And that's why we need to build the AMP, a 7.1 bus rapid transit line that would operate in dedicated lanes and connect our city east to west through downtown. If we keep people moving by giving them a way to travel without a car and by making travel easier for those who continue to use their car, the AMP will actually lessen the severity of traffic congestion in the future by incentivizing many would-be drivers to take transit, because taking the AMP would be just as easy and in some cases faster than sitting in traffic. Engineers have figured out how to keep the same number of through lanes for cars along most of the route while setting aside dedicated bus lanes for the AMP. The experience of taking the AMP will be much like using light rail or subway. You'll arrive at a station, pay before you board, the vehicle will pull up level to the platform, double sets of doors will slide open to allow everyone to get on quickly without waiting in line or going up steps, and off it goes to the next stop without getting stuck in traffic. And this is not a one-off project. This is the beginning of the type of transit we need across our county and across our region. While Nashville may be capturing the national headlines right now, it should not be lost on any of us that when it comes to mass transit, we are actually a decade behind our peer cities like Charlotte and Austin. And when I ride the bus, which I did this morning to come to work, the number 7 down Hillsborough Road, you can see the people who are going to benefit from this project. Whether it's young workers who want the freedom to choose to live without a car, our aging population who want to keep their mobility as they get older, or people with disabilities who depend on transit to get out, to work, to run errands, or simply to enjoy life. If we want Nashville to remain an attractive place for all types of people to live and work, then we must invest in better transit. I'm thrilled that recognizing this, the AMP Coalition has come together with partner groups such as the Greater Nashville Association of Realtors and the AARP to encourage more Nashvillians in this important conversation about our future. As a government, we've been working on the transit projects for close to 5 years now, and over the coming months, we will continue to do the necessary work to ensure this project will be successful. Last week, we filed a grant request with the Federal Transit Administration to receive $75 million toward the cost of the project. We'll know early next year whether that funding is included in the President's budget or whether there ever will be a budget again. We can only hope. In the meantime, we need your help supporting this vital project. You can go to ampyes.org to learn more and to get involved. We need to come together around this issue and make the right decision now to keep our city vibrant for decades to come. Before I close, and because this event is about vibrancy and the health of our city, I want to mention our next big health event coming up. It's the Mayor's Challenge 5K, where all Nashville is invited to run or walk through the streets of downtown. It will be held on Sunday, November 17th. It's free. It starts in our public square in front of the courthouse. There's free parking at LP Field. If you want to stay on message and take a bus to the event, you can get on the bus and say, I'm going to the Mayor's 5K, and it's totally free. Don't try that any other day. Let me stress, this is a walk or run. It's not a competition. The Titans have a Thursday game that week, so there's no excuse. This event is not about raising money, although that's a very noble thing to do, which we do very well in this city. It's simply about getting as many people as possible in our city to recognize the importance of getting active and staying active. So I look forward to seeing you on the 17th. We had 5,000 folks there last year. We'd love to have more. You all should be very optimistic about the prospects for our city. Nashville truly is a great city with a high quality of life, but we have to do better when it comes to individual health and the health of our children. With your continued hard work and investments, our best days are still to come. Thank you all for having me.
Good afternoon. I'm Rick Bernhardt, Executive Director of Metro Planning Department and leading the Nashville Next project, which many of you have been involved with. I want to take just a quick moment of personal privilege to acknowledge two true visionaries in this room. I'm not sure how many of you know that Mayor Bill Purcell was the vision behind the creation of the Nashville Civic Design Center. He pushed that creation, and I want to just recognize that and thank Mayor Purcell for that. I also want to particularly thank Mayor Carl Dean, who's my current boss, but I want to thank him for having the courage and perseverance to actually implement the projects of the Nashville Civic Design Center and to carry on with projects. It is so rare in this world today to have the courage and perseverance to lead a community and to recognize the importance of the decisions that we make today are going to create the city of tomorrow, the city of 2040. And so those decisions and those battles are being made. It's all too easy to put those off to some other term, some other administration, and I want to commend Mayor Dean for carrying through on that. It is truly a work of love, and I appreciate that. Now, so Julia doesn't get on me, I'll do what I'm supposed to be doing up here, which is to introduce our keynote speaker. Arthur Chris Nelson is a professor at the University of Utah. He has previously taught at a number of universities, including Kansas State and Georgia Tech, where I first met him. He is a prolific author on urban areas, urban issues. Most recently, his most recent book is Reshaping Metropolitan America, which is going to be the subject of the discussion today. Arthur, or as I know him as Chris, I never can get around the Arthur part, but is a presidential professor of city and metropolitan planning for the University of Utah. He's director of the Metropolitan Research Center and is co-director and master of real estate development program at the University of Utah. More importantly, he is the nation's leading urban analyst. He is one of those really unique individuals that can take what is happening out there, understand what the data says, and then explain that in a way that will allow us to make decisions that will affect the quality of life in this community. So without further ado, I want to turn this over to my friend, Chris Nelson.
I'm delighted to be here. I was here once about 25 years ago at a conference for some civil engineering organization, and I thought then that this city, Nashville, feels a lot like Portland, Oregon did to me. Now, I'm from Portland, Oregon. Always go back whenever I can to visit my family and friends and so forth, and it has a wonderful reputation. So I come back here this week and I see Nashville again after 25 years. I'll tell you what, Portland has nothing on Nashville. You've done a wonderful job in 25 years and keep it up. I'm serious. I couldn't sleep last night for all the ruckus in the hotel from going on downtown. Hockey and football, maybe soon some baseball. You are a BRT, a bus rapid transit away from true greatness. So proceed ahead. I also want to acknowledge a friend of mine from Virginia Tech. Rick doesn't know my checkered past. I've taught all across the country. I spent several years at Virginia Tech at the Alexandria campus, but I got to know Scott Poole, who's here with us today. Scott was then the architecture program director at Virginia Tech. I'm so glad that you have, at the University of Tennessee, Scott Poole with you. You're in great hands, Scott. And he paid me for that, of course. Oops, up. I've got to go backward. I don't know what happened. So I do write some books. This is my 25th book. Most go into remainders, and I can't pay my bills, but I do write a lot of books. But this book, I think, is changing some people's minds. We're looking at the future development patterns of the United States driven by demographic changes, and I'll talk about that extensively in my presentation. I urge you to buy the book. The book is on the tables out front, and you can sign up and buy the books if they're already sold out, because I dedicate the proceeds to my scholarship fund for students at the University of Utah. So buy one, buy many, buy a ton, and you'll help my students out. So I'm going to cover a lot of ground. I'm probably going to skip a few slides, although the whole presentation will be available. I'm going to focus on a few key trends. Now, what I'll be doing is I do compare Nashville, Davidson County with the rest of greater Nashville, as I would call it, to show you where you are and what's happened to the region, and particularly focus on the kinds of initiatives you might consider doing. But first of all, we have to realize, we all realize this, that the housing market has changed fundamentally. The 2000s that we all went through, the boom and the bust, the subprime mortgages that never should have been around are now gone. Well, they're coming back, I guess, but maybe a little differently. I worry about a few things. One in particular, the underwriting requirements are changing by the banks, logically, because they need to protect themselves. But we're moving towards a world, I think, where we're looking at the 20% down payment for homes as a matter of expectation. Now, certainly many people will buy homes for less than 20% down in the future, but more people in the future than in the past, I'm pretty certain, will be required to put 20% down to have the most favorable rates. Put this into context. According to the American Housing Survey for 2011, of all of the Americans who own their homes, 2/3 have a mortgage. 2/3 of them put less than 20% down. What is that going to do to the home ownership rate in this country, let alone any demographic changes? So I think that there's some interesting issues that we need to pay attention to going on out. This table shows the population changes between 2010 and 2040. I have a report that was put online earlier today by the Planning Department. It looks at the whole 10-county region I looked at, Nashville, Davidson County, of course, and other counties. The report goes from the period 2010 to 2025 and then on to 2040. So I'm giving you the 2040 look, but the report gives you sort of the interim view for 2025. This metropolitan area is growing, and that's a good thing. You're growing at about twice the national average. And that's important because, let's be honest, you can make a mistake and grow yourself out of it. That's important. A lot of metropolitan areas in this country can make mistakes, but they can't ever recover from them. So don't make many mistakes, but be mindful that you still have another opportunity. If you made a mistake on approving some residential or some non-residential development over in some corner someplace, in 20 years, this too will pass because you're growing. The metropolitan area, I divide the metropolitan area up into the Nashville, Davidson County center, and then all the other 9 counties around it that I call suburban Nashville. So that's why you see these numbers here. And these numbers may be a little deceiving. The suburban counties, collectively 9 of them, will account for over 80% of the growth. But be mindful that this is a large, dynamic economic engine you have here, labeled Nashville, but it extends many tens of miles around the city, actually absorbs the Clarksville metropolitan area and some other micropolitan areas. So it's a growing, dynamic region. To me, the fact that Davidson County, with only 15% of the land area of the region, will account for its proportionate share of population is important. And I'll get to more to that a little later on. We're also changing dramatically. If you look at the far left-hand column, look at the United States growth between 2010 and 2040 in terms of ethnic and racial population. By 2043, the census tells us that most Americans will be minority. Let me think about that. Most will be minority. So, to me, this emerging population we have, the emerging diversity population we have, I call the new majority. So, in my presentation today and in my report, I call all minorities will become majority, the new majority. So in this chart here, we see that for the United States as a whole, the new majority will completely dominate the nation's population growth. And for Nashville, Davidson County, it will account for all of the growth. As a matter of fact, according to Woods & Poole, the commercial projection service I use and prefer, the white population of this county will actually fall. And all of the growth then will be the new majority growth. But it's not that the suburban counties will pick up all of the white population. They certainly pick up a huge part of it. But look, I can't see this angle. Over 60% of the new majority population gain in this greater metropolitan area will be in suburban counties. So they are more rapidly changing, perhaps, than they might appreciate. I don't know what happened. Oh, population 65 and older. So I was surprised to find that, my studies around the country indicate to me that most central counties, those are the counties where the central city is, Atlanta, Georgia would be Fulton County, Salt Lake County would be where Salt Lake City is, and so on and so forth, Nashville, Davidson County. In most of these central counties, the aging population is going to be a very big part of their future. I was surprised to find, based on demographic work by Woods & Poole and some others, that yes, your aging population in this county will have an important part of the future. But look, 92% of the population change moving to 65 plus in this 10-county metropolitan area will be in suburban areas. So if anything, I would encourage the suburban communities to begin to plan ahead for the unique needs of the housing of the senior population going forward. I'm going to skip over this as I mentioned. Well, let's see. No, maybe not. Okay. One of the features of your rapid growth in this metropolitan area is that you're younger than the national average, you're growing faster than the national average, and so your composition is younger, more vibrant, more dynamic, and so forth. And it shows up in a very important way. The number of households now and projected in the future that have children in them, and so forth. Now, looking at the national average between 2010 and 2040 on the far left-hand side, something like 19% of the total change in households nationally will have children in them. 81% of the change in households over this 30-year period will not have children in them. That's because they've already raised their children. Boomers have raised their children, have not yet raised their children, or in some cases may never raise children. But look at the Nashville metropolitan area. Now, Davidson County sort of follows the national trend. But look at the suburban counties and the metropolitan area as a whole. You will have many more families or households with children as a share of total growth, roughly double the national average. But look at the number still. Nonetheless, more than 70% of the change in households between now and 2040 will not have children in them. I'm a baby boomer. When I was growing up, half of American households had children in them. We designed our landscapes, our communities, our zoning codes, assuming that we needed to meet the needs of households with children. We're moving into a different era now that we need to understand, I believe, much better than we do. And then look at the single-person households. These are mostly baby boomers who are aging along and lose their partners, and of course the young generation following us. Nationally, we're seeing that something like 40% of the total change in households between 2010 and 2040 will be single-person households. That will have a tremendous effect on the housing choices we need to offer the future population. It's a little less here in the metropolitan area than the national average. It's about the same, in Nashville-Davidson. About a third of the total change in households for suburban Nashville and the greater Nashville metropolitan area will be single-person households. That is a very large share of the future housing needs that we need to start coming to grips with. Now, it's not that these things will happen all at once. These are changes that happen incrementally, like a Chinese torture, one dripping year after one dripping year, until one day you wake up 20 years from now and realize, oops, we have changed. Let me talk about that some more with this next slide. So I divide the American households very crudely into three very broad housing demand types. Starter home households, this is where the householder is under 35 years of age. They're starting out in life, starting out in their careers, starting families, raising families, and so forth. Then we have the group that has the demand for the most housing services possible. The peak housing demand group between 35 and 64, one, maybe two wage earners, raising children, the mother, father maybe need their own spaces for in-house, offices and so on and so forth. So this is the group that we have been catering to over the past 20, 30, 40 years. This is the group that has the largest amount of space demands. And then we have the downsizing households, those over 65, who are, the house is too big, the lot is too big, they're looking for something smaller, maybe with more accessibility to services and so on. So here we see the change between 1990 and 2010, and then looking between 2010 and 2040. Look what happened between 1990 and 2010 in the US, and look also at the metropolitan area here. In the US, there was no change in the number of starter households. There was actually a decline in the number. This explains why between the 1990s and 2000s, the apartment market tanked in many parts of the country. There was no demand, or very little demand. But look at the demand for peak housing need households. They demanded about 75% of all the new housing produced in this country over that 20-year period. And I don't show this on the table, but about 80% of all the new housing stock built between 1990 and 2010 was in fact single-family detached, meeting the demands of the 75% of the total change in households who were boomers raising their own children, who had the income, who had the need for housing, and you get the picture. We did a very good job meeting their needs. And the rest of the households were the downsizers. A little side note on the peak housing demand. Nationally, 40% of all of the new detached units built in this country were over 1/2 acre lots. So we had the housing, we had the land, we had the space, we met that need. But look what happens going forward. Now, national trends are more dramatic than trends around here, but you're paralleling the national trends. We need to be mindful of that. So for the metropolitan area as a whole, what we see is that between 2010 and 2040, about a quarter of the net change in housing demand will be to support starter households, about 27%. Now, these are households who need apartments, condos, townhouses, small homes, small lots, and you get the picture. But look at what's happening to the demand for households in their peak housing consumption period. Sorry. Roughly between 1/2 demand and 3/4 demand less than we saw between 1990 and 2010. In other words, the future demand for this region for larger homes on larger lots will be considerably less than what it was in the past. You will still have a demand. You will still have to provide for those households, but the rate of demand is considerably less. And when you combine the downsizing households that are looking for smaller homes, smaller lots, attached homes, and so on and so forth, and the starter homes households who are looking for the same thing, they become collectively the dominant part of the housing market in this county and in the whole rest of the metropolitan area. Now, again, this is a Chinese torture, drip by drip by drip. You're not going to see the change next year or the year after. But by 2025, if you haven't figured out where you're headed demographically, by 2025, you're going to have some very interesting issues. Overproduction of housing that the market doesn't want. Therefore, collapsing values of the oversupply, right? And then because of the housing mismatch, you've got increased demand for other kinds of housing and other kinds of locations. Do your planning right, begin with the demographic analyses now, and set yourselves up to manage that change now, because in 2025, 2030, you don't want to be behind the eight ball. Along with this, we're seeing some dramatic changes in home ownership rates. This particular chart shows the home ownership rate between 1965 and 2012, last year. We peaked out at about 69% home ownership rate in the country in 2005. Now, in 2005, we were living in Alexandria, my wife and I, and we had a cat. And the cat was named Valentine. And in the mail in 2009, we got a letter from a bank addressed to Valentine Nelson. You know where this is going. This particular bank, that no longer exists, by the way, was offering our cat a $1.5 million pre-approved mortgage for better terms than we had. Well, I didn't put her paw print on the acknowledgement block and sent it back in, so she never did buy the house, and look what happened to the economy since. Because our cat didn't buy a home, the housing market collapsed. This chart shows the number of people who are 65 each year between 1970 and projected to 2040. And the steep part here is the baby boomers, people like me turning 65. We turned 65 between 2011 and 2029. So the number of people over 65 will increase in this country from 13% to 19%, percents. What this means is that half of the nation's change in population will be attributable, or assignable, I should say, to people turning 65. We are going to be the half of the net change in population. Now, we're already here. This is subtle. We're already here. We're just aging along. But we will be half of the net change share of the population. Think about that for a couple minutes. Now, it also turns out that when we turn 65, I did some studies on this, actually have a book coming out on this. When we turn 65, we don't die. As a matter of fact, it may very well be that children born this year, according to National Geographic, the ultimate source of authority here, I guess, but they're not alone. Children born roughly this period of time in American history may very well expect to live between 110 and 120 years. Now, of course, the federal government says when a child is born this year, they can expect to live to be about 80. That's the normal calculation. But when you're looking at the kinds of medical advances undergoing today, and extrapolate them over just the next few years, it becomes very clear to people like me that we will probably be living a lot longer than we ever thought we would. I've got a neighbor down the street in Salt Lake City. He's working on, I don't know all the jargon and all the stuff, but he sucks stem cells out of your own bone marrow and does something to them and then sticks them into degenerating organs to regenerate organ tissue in your body. It's already been done. And before too long, it's going to be commercialized. Well, imagine this. If you have a failing liver or pancreas or something, you might be able to, in 10 years or less, fix it with your own body stem cells. And this is just one of many advances coming down the pike. So, doing some other reading around, it occurs to me that people who turn 65 this year, I'm not there yet, thankfully, but those of you who do turn 65 this year can probably expect to live well into your 90s as a matter of predictable routine. After all, if you've gotten 65 by now, you got a pretty good running start at getting into the 90s. But by 2030, if you turn 65, you will probably be able to predict that you're going to be living to 110 or thereabouts. So what's that going to do to pension funds and Social Security and so on and so forth? It may very well be the retirement goes up to 80, 90, which is something my students wouldn't want to see. But we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. The bottom line is we are in for some very interesting changes in how long we live. I also want to point out that as the boomers age, their housing choices change. Surprise, surprise. So this chart was actually developed by Dal Myers of Southern California and his doctoral student. This chart shows the propensity of households by 5-year age cohorts to buy homes and sell homes. So as you're starting a family out, there's a lot of buying and selling, trading up activity in the early part of your life. Selling kind of tapers off and then buying tapers off. Look what happens in your late 60s. The propensity for people to buy continues to fall, but the propensity to sell skyrockets. So I'm not showing you the numbers here, at least on a slide, but I'm doing some studies on what's going to happen when the boomers start turning 70, which happens in 2016. Between 2016 and 2030, I fear, my numbers tell me this, I'm trying to tell them don't tell me this, but they're not cooperating. My numbers tell me that between 2015 and 2030, nationally, there may be about 15 million more seniors who can't sell their homes, who want to sell their homes, than there are buyers or even renters for their homes. So I worry about the end of this decade, and especially the 2020s, where this overhang of senior-driven unloading becomes another housing crisis. But only in certain large parts of the country, the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, what's left. Nashville will be fine. You'll have enough, again, growth will solve a lot of problems. Salt Lake City will be fine, Atlanta will be fine, Austin will be fine, but whole swaths of the country will be unfine, or whatever the term would be. So when a senior sells their home, what do? Assuming they can sell their home, by the way. So it turns out that 80% of seniors, those over 65, own their homes. It's the age group with the largest percentage home ownership rate. But when they sell at about 4% per year, a very small number, so they're stable, they own their homes. But when they sell, it turns out that most of them, over 70, most of them become renters. They go to assisted living, or they go to some apartment, or they move in with their children perhaps. Something happens. They move from ownership to rentership at a pretty high rate the older they get. But that, of course, is assuming that they can sell their homes. Well, what does this tell me? If we're seeing a large increase in starter home households, combined with seniors selling their homes, assuming they can sell their homes, becoming renters, we're seeing a world in which renter demand could be very, very high, including this metropolitan area. I'm going to skip over that. Oops. Can I go back, please? Yeah. I do. I'm going to skip over that. Okay, so something else is going on too. Energy prices, price of gasoline. This particular chart shows the price of gasoline in real terms, unadjusted terms, between 2002 and 2012. It's the weekly price. We had this little dip called the Great Recession, but we've sort of recovered mostly since then. We think we've recovered anyway. I ran a regression line on the price of gasoline over this time period and got a 0.7 R squared. For those who do stats, this is a pretty high number. It's almost a prediction line, and a pretty good T ratio. But what this tells me is that gasoline prices on average, ups and downs, but on average, have been going up about 10% per year compounded. 10% per year compounded. Wages have not gone up. Unadjusted wages have gone up about 3% per year compounded, but controlling for inflation, they haven't gone up. So I'm finding myself and with my builder clients and investor clients that for the first time in our collective memories, we're seeing more, not a lot yet, but more new housing consumers begin to internalize the expectation of ever-increasing gasoline prices as a percent of their household budgets, which means they begin to hedge their bets. Now, they can buy a fuel-efficient car if they can afford one, but more likely they'll choose the smaller home, the smaller lot, defer home ownership, rent something for a little while longer, and then they might realize even more longer and longer still, and they might become permanent renters, many of them. Not all of them, but many more in the future than in the past. There's something else going on too that I don't have a slide for, but the next generation, the Gen Ys, and especially the millennials, they are the ones who want to keep their options open. Many of them, not most, I don't want to overstate this, about a third is my guess, about a third of these generations will probably not buy a home, so they're free to move whenever opportunities arise anywhere around the country. And it's not like that when they move, they sever their social contacts. Facebook and Twitter and all these things keep them in contact. They're just relocating to where the next job might be. And so I'm going to be seeing that there'll be a rise of a higher and higher percentage of households that we normally would expect to buy homes deciding not to buy homes, to keep their options open so that they can move when new opportunities arise and not be shackled with the home they'd have to sell. So, I do the numbers and I try to come up with some insights, and it's tricky business, and I'm the first to admit. And by the way, if anybody has better numbers than I do, just give them to me and I'll use them. And nobody's challenged me on that yet, because they don't have the better numbers. So I look at the home ownership rate in the future from this perspective. If we held constant the home ownership rate of all American households by race and ethnicity in 2010 to the future, what would be the nation's home ownership rate in aggregate? Well, we're moving towards a new majority population, and it turns out that unfortunately, minority households own homes at a far less rate than whites. As a matter of fact, whites own their homes at about a 72% rate nationally, all other minority groups at about 47% nationally. A very big difference. And between 1995 and 2012, the minority home ownership rate didn't change much. Up and down, but didn't really change. There's a lot of reasons for that I won't go into, except our collective society's inability or unwillingness to pay for the education needs of the next generation. That's another story. That's another four-hour lecture. What I'm projecting is that by 2030, the nation's home ownership rate will drop from 66% to 63%, which means that about 2/3 nationally of all new housing units built would need to be built to meet the renter demand. That's what that small change means. A small change on a big base, like we have here, is a big number. But I've got another model that says, what if we look more realistically at the home ownership rates, again by race and ethnicity, going to 2030, relaxing the constant assumption, because after all, right now today in 2013, tail end of 2013, the home ownership rates of each and every race and ethnic group is lower now than it was in 2010. How far down are we going to be going? I don't know. Maybe we've leveled out. Maybe we're going to come back up. Who knows? But if we take a 5% adjustment to the home ownership rate back in 2010, we see that nationally the home ownership rate goes down to 60%, which means that technically every new residential unit brought onto the market would have to be for rental purposes. Now, that won't happen, of course. We'll have many millions of homes built for homeowners, but what that means is that many currently owner-occupied homes will flip to renter-occupied homes. And we all see this happening all across the country right now anyway. So I do something heroic. I try to estimate the homeownership rate for Davidson County and the rest of the study area and the suburban areas. But I'm holding the 2010 homeownership rates constant. I'm not assuming anything lower, which means that my numbers are probably, they're conservative. So we see that the homeownership rates will fall, in some cases, fairly dramatically. So Davidson County, for example, will fall from about 56% to 48% or whatever the number is, I can't quite see it. About a 12% reduction in home ownership rate because you're diversifying at a very fast rate, and unfortunately, new majority households don't earn the level of income the white households do. But the reduction in home ownership rate will also affect the suburban areas and the metropolitan area as a whole. So I want to talk about one more thing about demographics and changing demand. Then I want to talk about an evolving future that you all face, in my view. Some years ago, early 2000s, when I was beginning to get into this line of interest, it occurred to me, okay, what is it that American households want for options for places to live? So I picked up surveys by builder groups and developer groups and so on and so forth. I got a dozen surveys or so from professional organizations whose business it is to inform their clients and their members who are builders. And by the way, I wouldn't pick up any surveys from any planning group or Sierra Club or others like that because I wouldn't trust them. I mean, maybe their surveys are fine and dandy, but I wanted to know what the builder surveys were telling builders, right, where they thought the housing demands were based on surveys. Now, back up a trace. We know from surveys, for example, by the National Association of Realtors, that about 80% of all Americans, when given a choice between detached and attached and mobile home and spaceship and all these things, 80% would choose the single-family detached home. Well, it turns out that's what Japanese want. It's what Germans want. It's what Chinese want. 80% seems to be the human preference for single-family detached homes. In fact, I think if you go back to Neanderthal times, 80% of Neanderthals wanted their single-family detached cave. But when you add in accessibility to work and services and other kinds of things, you know, the human being is very good about calculating choices based on all kinds of attributes and trade-offs. So when we trade off all kinds of things, then the outcome becomes a little different. So I published a survey in the Journal of the American Planning Association in 2006 that discovered from these surveys of builders for builders that about 38% of American households wanted the option, not necessarily that they'd choose it, but they wanted to have the ability to choose an attached product. Townhouse, condominium, apartment, cooperative, whatever. 37% wanted a small lot. And what is a small lot? By some surveys, it's under a quarter of an acre. Others, it's under 1/8 of an acre. These particular surveys, one of them said 1/6 of an acre. So somewhere in there's a small lot. And then 25% wanted, you know, all the others, anything above that, the larger lots, of course. So RC Elco, Robert Charles Lesser Company, did their own survey about a year later, and they surveyed only prospective home buyers, not renters. My survey included renters. Their survey, or my survey of surveys, but their survey looked only at buyers of homes, and this was their result. Kind of the same, you know, at least the same order of magnitude. Then the National Association of Realtors last year, or 2 years ago, 2011, did an update of a survey they did earlier in the decade, in 2000s, and they came up with the same preference patterns as options to consider for households as I did in 2006. Okay, if three completely different survey approaches come up with essentially the same answer, right? I think there's something going on here. So let's look at the demand, assuming this is the demand, and let's look at supply. AHS's American Housing Survey. So we are undersupplying attached products. We are not quite supplying small lot products, and we're oversupplying large lot products. Hello. And now it's not that we overbuilt these necessarily. We built to meet the demand, right? This was not necessarily a mistake. It is a mistake if we overzone and tell builders and home buyers you can only buy that 1 acre lot, and there's no other choice. But by and large, you know, we delivered the housing products the market demanded in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. But the market is moving. The market is moving. In a good year, we only add 1.5% to our housing inventory. So if the housing demand is up in here, and we're only adding 1.5% of the housing inventory on this base, it'll take us 20 years, 30 years to move this ship into another direction. So for the time being, we have, I think, some important challenges ahead of us. I'm going to skip over these two. They're going to be posted. I want to talk about your future. This is your future for Davidson County and some of the closer-in areas of the surrounding suburban counties. This is a dead or dying strip center, actually in Atlanta, Georgia, where I spent a lot of years at Georgia Tech. This is only 5 miles from downtown Atlanta, Georgia. And of course, this is replicated all across the metropolitan Atlanta area by the scores. Now, you have none of these, right? Oh, you have some? Okay, well, why is this what I call the promised land? Because they're large sites, by and large. They're under one ownership or a collection of owners who have one thing in common: they want to make money. The sites are flat. They didn't used to be flat maybe, but they're flat now, making them a little easier to build. In front of these sites are 4 and 6 and 8-lane highways, allowing you to retrofit BRT or other forms of transit. And they're also wide enough to give you the flexibility you need to rip out the old infrastructure and put in the new infrastructure. And one more thing. Behind here is a neighborhood of residences, and they are fit to be tied that their backyard is this thing here. It gives us the opportunity to turn potential NIMBYs, not in my backyard, to YIMBYs, yes, in my backyard. Fix this for me, please. Because this is depressing property values. If you go back in and work with them as partners and work with other property owners and get your market analysis right, you can turn this into a beneficial development, benefiting both the residences and meeting market needs. When we get it up, the bottom line is that we have a two-tiered development regime in this country. We have residential development and we have non-residential development. It turns out that when you approve a residential development, a subdivision, a apartment building, whatever it is, condominium building, expect that residential development will last 170 years on average. Now, I came up with this number using 3 completely different federal databases, which, by the way, are all shut down now, so I can't go back and double-check my own numbers. But I looked at census, I looked at American Housing Survey, and I looked at the Department of Energy websites. And what I learned was that the homes built after 1940, on average, will be with us for about 170 years. So I had a friend at a California university who said I'm crazy, it's too high. He ran his own numbers, he got 200 years. Then I have a colleague at some significant university in the Boston area that'll go unnamed, and he said, you're both wrong, it's 500 years. So I don't think so. But the bottom line is that when you approve a residential project, take it off of your maps for any redevelopment opportunities forever. You know, not forever, but for the rest of our lives, our children's lives, and our cats' lives, and everything else. But look over here. The non-residential stock doesn't last very long, nor should it. Non-residential stock, by and large, not all of it, not the downtown buildings, of course, but the 7-Elevens and the Targets and everything else, they're built to last just for the investment period. And so the buildings are not over-invested. The investors get their money back as they should, but the building then becomes recyclable. You can tear it down, repurpose it, whatever the case is. Which means that over the period of about, I don't have time to go over this slide in detail, but the idea is that in a growing metropolitan area, land value continues to increase, but a building continues to decrease or wear out and become obsolescent. So somewhere around the 30th year, give or take 5 years for a 50-year building, the building owner says, I don't want to have the land worth more than the building. I want to repurpose, rebuild, redevelop my site. And so at the University of Utah, we came up with a mathematical formula that takes every non-residential parcel and looks at growth patterns and everything else, and estimates within, in this case, 10-year, but we can do it within 5-year parameters, when each and every non-residential parcel can become an opportunity for redevelopment. Now, this is important for a couple of reasons. Now, this is an example of the Salt Lake Valley, but I know enough about non-residential markets to know that this is probably the same in Nashville and Atlanta and Charlotte and Portland and all those places. Non-residential is kind of the same everywhere. The FAR, floor area ratio, that's the ratio of building space to land area, the FAR is about 0.2. 0.2. That means that 80% of the land area is not for building space. It's for parking or storage or something other than building space. Now, I did similar numbers that's in the report for Nashville, found the same thing. And as a matter of fact, you have the data here, your planning department has the data here to do the mapping for Davidson County as we did for Salt Lake County. What can you do with these non-residential spaces as they become opportunities for development? Well, let's look at some numbers. I'm going to skip over that. So for this larger 10-county area, as you add more and more jobs, you have to increase your total supply of built space, of course. You'll need to add, you have about 500 million square feet of space, non-residential space in 2010. You'll have to add about 400 million more square feet between now and 2040 to accommodate new jobs. You are going to tear down and rebuild about 800 million square feet between now and 2040. Well, that doesn't add up. You have 500 million square feet now. You're going to tear down and rebuild 800 million square feet. Go back to that chart. A lot of the stuff you're building now this year will come down again in the 2040s, maybe late 2030s. So some stuff you build now will come down. So adding up all the new construction and the tear downs on top of the base that you have, 800 million square feet of stuff will be torn down and replaced in some fashion between now and 2040. Adding to that the 400 million square feet of net new space you need, you're going to build a 1.2 billion square feet of non-residential space between now and 2040. That will come at a price of about $250 billion. $250 billion. And we can divide this up between Davidson County and the rest of the metropolitan area as you see on this chart, but I want to leave you with a couple of takeaways. First of all, for Davidson County and the closer in parts of the suburban counties, all of your new demand for non-residential space and all of your new demand for rental apartment housing or condos or townhouses, all of that, could be accommodated on existing commercial boulevards. If you're averaging 0.2 FAR now, we know from literature, and architects know this of course, that we can move from 0.2 to up to 0.5 FAR and still have adequate parking if we have the right mix of land uses. Residential, office, retail. If you mix the uses up right, you actually economize on overall parking demands. So you can move to a 0.5 or so FAR, which is more than enough, by the way, to cover all of your new non-residential development and all of your new rental housing development needs between now and 2040. If you added BRT to the mix, on those BRT corridors, you can actually move the FAR to about 0.7. and still have the parking you need. And most people will still drive. But we're taking care of that margin group that will make a difference in our overall land use patterns. So my advice to you, especially Davidson County, but also the closer in parts of the suburban metropolitan area, in my view, the future is the redevelopment of existing commercial corridors, and you know how to do it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all very much for coming. Dr. Nelson has a 2:30 flight, and it has been a real treat to have him. But if you want to send hate mail, sadly, you're going to have to track him online. Thank you again very much, Chris. Knowledge is power, and the people in this room really reflect some of the most powerful people we have in Davidson County and in our region. You are the people who every day go to work and make the decisions that impact our life and our built environment. If we are going to have to replace, I believe it was 800 million square feet, it is up to you all to make it so that it's designed well, it functions well, it's an asset, it's something we're proud of, and more importantly, it's something that also helps not only our communal health, but our physical health. And I really love being in this community because my experience is that, in fact, with really almost everyone in this room, that's a conversation that I've had with you, and that your enthusiasm and vitality and drive to making this happen for our city is tangible. Dr. Nelson was, brought him in last night, and we stopped in front of the Hilton, and there was a Predators game. It was the opening game. We won, in case y'all didn't know. And I was parked facing the pedestrian bridge, and it was a sea of golden jerseys pouring towards me, except for the 5-year-old girls in hot pink ones with a Predators cat in the front. They looked pretty sassy. But coming towards me with the band behind me and the hotel, they couldn't move the cars fast enough. And I thought, this is Nashville. And my many friends in many other facets of the community who question our rate of growth and are concerned about our rate of growth and are concerned about our future, in many instances, what concerns them, the horse is out of the barn. It is our duties to make sure that this change that is here, it is now. It is not, as he said, it's not a Chinese water torture. I mean, it is everyday decisions we have to make. And most people I know, 5 years ago, they were really stressed and really tired, and in fact, they were up all night, and they were up all night because they couldn't pay their bills because the market was so crummy. Well, now, everybody I know is really stressed and really overtired because they're working so hard. And people are making great decisions and working really hard, and it's a fabulous time. Y'all are pretty bright, and you're probably brighter than I am. I've had to read his book 6 times to be able to write the press release. Thank you. We have copies here. Our sponsors, some of them, you all will be receiving copies, but they're available out there. And your cards that you got that showed you where to sit has the Nashville Next website on it, and his report is there, and there are even more slides that are even more dense for those of you who are bright and good at graphs. One last thing is on Saturday, this coming Saturday, there will be a Nashville Next visioning exercise. If y'all have not signed up for it, I encourage you to do it, and if you have a friend or cohort that has a hard time sort of wrapping their heads around the growth and the rate of growth in the community, I would really encourage you to get them to sign up or to take them with you to participate. It's a really fabulous exercise that they've developed, and anybody who doesn't normally get to play with maps and visioning will be really excited. One last note, you all make the Civic Design Center possible. This event alone accounts for about 1/3 of our annual budget. We cannot thank you enough. We love our jobs. If you go online, you'll see a lot of the work we've done, and one of the most exciting things as the executive director of the Design Center is looking at the projects that we put out there as an idea and as a vision that are now, in fact, coming to life. There are tangible physical changes happening in the built environment of our city simply based on us and our partnerships with you all and with UT and with Vanderbilt and with other organizations, and taking that information, putting it out there until, in fact, you find those ideas, pick them up, and make them real. So thank you all very much for happening, and thank you for patting your back.